Thank you guys for checking out this episode with Dr. Luke Johnson. We touched on early Christian history. I asked him a couple of questions to finish off some of our previous conversations. And as usual, we discussed other alternative and truth-driven content. I hope you guys enjoy. Thanks again. Welcome back to The Balancing Act. Dr. Luke Johnson, how are you?
I am fantastic. I'm really happy to be back talking with you tonight. You know, I really didn't know what to prepare because a little bit of correspondence that we had going into this, you're like, something on the Council of Nicaea and the Apocrypha. And I was like, I don't know if Garnet knows this or not, but I am not some sort of theological expert. It dovetails nicely with this Bible study that I've been doing on my YouTube channel.
Right.
For my own spiritual edification. I've been studying the Gospel of Luke, doing a line-by-line analysis of that, but I've been kind of learning as I go. And I have to say, like, it's really sucked me in to church history and theology in a way that I hadn't in quite some time because I've been really preoccupied with synchromysticism. But so anyone who's listening to this, you should fact check me on everything. I'm likely to make some mistakes. I did have a chance to prepare. I've been cleaning out a garage and listening to a ton of audiobooks. I listened to Elaine Pagel's The Gnostic Gospels, the Great Courses program that Bart Ehrman presented something for, and a couple other ones that escape my knowledge at the moment. I'm going to try to say something intelligible about this for your audience. So, yeah, what did you want to? I have a lot of notes. I've leaned heavily on Grok to help me organize my notes. So I maybe this is a subject that we'll weave our way into, but I've gotten really into using AI as a way to assimilate information and to help me with my writing and my lecturing. So I'm kind of trying that out. So if you see a lot of Grok-looking charts on here, that's because they are. And these are my notes to help keep things straight because there's a lot of confusing actors in early church history. There's a lot of confusing movements.
Yes.
It's easy.
I learned a lot just from the notes that you sent over earlier. And, you know, I've always had this sort of interest in it, and I couldn't even trace back to when it was, but you mentioned the Da Vinci Code, and I do remember that movie when I was younger. I think I saw it in theaters with my grandma, actually, and it did spark this interest that I hadn't had before in early Christian history, which is why I do have some understanding of the Gnostic worldview, and I have studied a little bit of Gnostic teachings, but this early, more Orthodox Christian, I kind of didn't study anything post the Council of Nicaea because I had this idea in mind that was where it got politicized, and he left out all of the books about inner wisdom. But with your notes today, that's not even the case. Like, that wasn't the council that determined the canon, and there were several councils after that actually it was a much more gradual process. So that was something that I learned just from. So when you do a deep dive, you really do a good job. I was blown away. And I did ask you mostly because of the biblical studies that you're doing on your channel right now, and whether or not that had been a part of your past. I recently met you, so in my mind, you are somewhat of a biblical scholar, and at the very least, a scholar. So when you are interested in something, you clearly do your due diligence.
It's being neurodivergent. I'm obsessive compulsive and have imposter syndrome. I don't want anybody to call me a fraud.
Man, you really do the work. I was just like, whoa, okay, yeah, this is going to be good.
Well, I hope so. I mean, I think that's kind of an interesting thing to maybe even broach this subject with. You know, I have had an interest in religious studies for a long time. I know you're always kind of interested in the personal aspect of things. Mm-hmm. I've taken some theology courses here and there over the past 20 years. Nothing super disciplined or rigorous. My interest in Christianity came as a result of studying the works of Soren Kierkegaard, which I think we've talked about elsewhere. That's what I did my dissertation on. I got a PhD in philosophy, although I don't really consider myself a philosopher anymore. And that's a whole subject. But Yeah, I've touched on theology. I mean, Christianity was really essential for my awakening process. Like, I believe that God opened my eyes to a lot of truths of this world and continues to. So, I know a lot of people view Christianity as a control mechanism and that look at these councils as a way to,
I've
um,
started to view religion, organized religion itself, as a form of technology, which is to say that is another tool that can be used for amazing, beautiful, wonderful results, or it can be used to manipulate and deceive and this sort of thing. So
I
yeah,
totally agree. I mean, I think we may have even talked about this somewhere else, but when I had my awakening, I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm hemorrhaging all my secular people. But at least like there'll be some kind of Christian community for me there. Nope, not at all. Because what you find is, like you say, that a lot of deep truths of Christianity are gate kept. And the vast majority of people, unfortunately, don't read the Bible or take it as seriously as they ought to. And because of biases, they're built into the seminaries, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of topics are too taboo to talk about because, frankly, too much of the church has been connected to mammon. I think a lot of people are afraid to talk about controversial subjects because
amen.
it's too disruptive to the idea we have in our mind about what America
But was
is. What
Jesus afraid to talk about controversial subjects? Like that's where it's like,
Yeah.
anyways.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, right? But you can see, right, like that ultimately that because Jesus talked about the taboo things and said a great many things that caused disruption at that
That
period,
caused them to get crucified.
it caused them to get crucified, which we get into an interesting theological conversation about, like, that's what needed to happen in order to atone for the noetic effects of sin that occurred in the Garden of Eden. But also, many of the early apostles were met a unfortunate end, and the first, second, and third century Christians were fed to lions and torched and used for ritual sacrifice for the pagan Roman government. It wasn't
Yeah.
really until this Emperor Constantine established some sort of tolerance and even identity with the growing Christian faith in order to unify Rome that we start to see church and state come together. And I'm not, and it, there was probably an emperor. I think it might be Theodosius who established the tolerance, but it was Constantine who, um, who's the one that had the religious vision of the cross and had his soldiers painted on their shields, and they marched into battle and won this improbable victory, and supposedly converted to Christianity, although that's hotly disputed. And as we'll see with the Council of Nicaea, there's some debate about what type of Christianity he converted to, because what happened at the Council of Nicaea, like you said, it wasn't about the canon. It wasn't about the books of the Bible. And you're right to point out that it was a slow moving process. It really wasn't until the 16th century at the Council of Trent that you had you had this codified, like, this is the canon. And what was happening here in 325 CE is that you're having primarily a conversation between Arius and Athanasius. Specifically, what we're talking about is the Aryan controversy. Do you know anything about this?
Other than the notes that you sent today, and it looks like this is a debate between Jesus as created by God, right? But still subordinate to him, but still sufficient enough to gain salvation through, versus Jesus as God, basically.
Right. It wasn't even so much a debate about whether or not Jesus was divine. I think both sides in this controversy, in the Arian controversy, recognized Jesus was divine. But what are we talking about in terms of divinity? And Arius in the Arian controversy, essentially what he was saying is that the Father precedes the Son. The Son is subordinate, and he is begotten, meaning that he is created in some way. And because Christ is created in some way, as certain verses of the Bible seem to talk about. I don't have them here, but I think it gets into this question of what begotten means. But I think what he was trying to say is because he's created in a way before time is established, before creation is established, right? But he is somehow anterior to the Father's existence. He is created and therefore not co-eternal and not consubstantial. There's this word heterousia, right? In contrast to homoousia, right? Which is coming from the same substance, homoousia versus heterousia, a different substance. And because he comes from this different substance, he's created, there's also going to be an end to this, which would mean that Christ is not eternal in the same way that, or at all, as the Father. And this is kind of the nutshell of Arianism, right? And because this ideology was causing a schism within the Roman Empire, and Constantine was looking for unity because at this particular time, I believe Rome was what's called a tetrarchy or something like that. And I'm not an expert on it. There was essentially 4 different divisions of it. He didn't want any more schism or any more division, and got the Council of Nicaea together in order to resolve this issue. He couldn't understand why the Christians were fighting with one another over this minute point of theology, but it's a really big deal, right? It's a big deal for so many different reasons because it's going to set up how we understand the Trinity. It's really about what it means for Jesus to be God.
Yeah. Before we get too much further, I did have a couple of questions from previous discussions that I just wanted to tie up. One of them actually does kind of relate to what we're talking about, just in a Jungian sense, I guess you would say. But you had said, and I wish I understood the context when you said it, but you did say at one point that you weren't concerned with the application of ideas. I think we were talking about basically the word practical and the practical use of some of the things that we were discussing. And I was just curious because if not for practical use, where do you find the value of intellectual pursuit? Because for me, it seems like you're either going to utilize the idea in some way or help you understand others who might have that belief. Like it always ties back to some practical use for me. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm an intellectual truth pursuer as well. But to me, there's always, you're either discarding it to never even worry about it again, or there's some use to it.
Well, this gets into a conversation about what is practical utility. Like, what is practice? If I felt like a lot of these ideas had a large audience, I think you could have quoted me as saying that it is for some sort of practical utility.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
And one of the reasons,
that's still practical. If it's number one, if you enjoy it, that's a practical reason right there for me.
Well, a lot of people would think that's unproductive and that that's not really a practical application. I mean, look, the pursuit of truth, even if it's only from the audience of myself, gives some sort of justification to my existence. Now, you could make the argument that I have improperly structured my life, that if I'm pursuing Jungian Gnosticism or synchromysticism or this minutia about subordinationism, like if somehow Christ is not consubstantial with the Father and really delving into the beliefs of Arianism, that somehow I haven't properly structured my life if I'm involved in all this navel gazing.
Yeah, I mean, there certainly could be an argument said for that. Like, why aren't you out gardening or, manufacturing some sort of product?
Make
or
the
whatever.
socks. Make the socks, Anon.
That's
what the tariffs are going to do. You're going to give everybody's life is going to have so much more meaning now because we're bringing manufacturing back, and you're going to be you're going to be at that desk and you're going to be putting together iPhones and making socks, and now life has meaning again. A lot of people need that. Maybe I need it. Maybe I need to make socks.
No, I feel like the pursuit of understanding where certain belief systems come from it can help sharpen the way that you view the world and the way that you basically render your reality using kind of HD language there. But it's like, we only act on the beliefs that we actually hold. And whether or not we hold the beliefs of other belief systems, if other people are actually believing them, it can be useful and practical to understand those belief systems so that you can better understand how that person that you have to interact with is operating.
Right. I mean, I guess because of everything that has happened with the world over the past 10 years, I don't have high hopes that a lot of the things that I investigate can actually bring a lot of benefit to a wide swath of humanity. I mean, I made a total fool of myself trying to wake people up.
Yeah.
I ruined a lot of the social status that I have in this for the sake of truth. And I feel like a lot of the things that I was talking about in my personal relationships are really not that hard to grasp, right? Like we don't even have to go into conspiracy topics today, but it, like conspiracy topics are like pretty simple, to grasp intellectually. They're really not that demanding. What's demanding is deprogramming yourself, humbling yourself, expanding your consciousness. These are existential movements that, not everyone's ready for.
Yeah, but I think the conspiracies can help. If some people it might not be, might take them in the opposite direction. But I think that it can kind of shake people out of their shell a little bit.
Well, this gets into the interesting question about Gnosticism and whether or not everyone is here on the same sort of mission. I hate to keep, I'm more skeptical about Gnosticism than ever after doing this research for our talk today because of the circumstances of the Nag Hammadi scrolls and when they are made and looking into the finer points of church history about what is more authentic and what's not. I can't say that my confidence is totally boosted in the Gnostic paradigm, if there is a monolithic Gnostic paradigm, which I don't believe there is. There's many different Gnostic thinkers. Right. A lot of people just want to say that's Gnostic. Well, there's a lot of different movements that were Gnostic. I'm not exactly sure where I shake out on this. I think Marcionism is intriguing to me, but I'm still in a process. I'm still looking into it. So we might have this stratification of hylics, pneumatics, and psychics, and there's a lot of hylics and pneumatics here. Maybe there's just not gonna be, there's just not a lot of truth seekers, or the ones that are here need to have a nice, tidy belief system that is uncomplicated and not rough around the edges.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, I've just given up on trying to wake people up. It's just like, I live my life as an awake person and I do the things that if I meet somebody like you who's willing to go for it, I'm like, all right, man, let's go for it. But for the most part, it's a balancing act,
Yeah.
A lot of people at work, I'll talk to them about sports, and that's fun.
Yeah. I mean, I love sports. I mean, the Commanders had an awesome season.
What about Ovi?
What about Ovi?
You had your Book of Daniel prediction, and I was all for it, honestly. But I also began to realize that it's not all narrative rigging. I think that that Vegas has a large role, and that depending on how the bets are laid out, they can say, yeah, we're going to weight this narrative a little bit more than this narrative because we're going to lose a little bit too much money if y'all go with this narrative. But that's just my take on that.
I think that stuff goes on, but really, I think we live in a hyper spiritual world, and so the narratives that I see them not coming from men. I think they are coming from they are woven into this reality.
But that brings up an interesting thing that I think about very often in terms of sports betting.
Yeah,
I think it's AI controlled. I mean, how are the odds updating live as fast as they are? Like, just
Well,
I
the
know you're
different,
probably not involved in that world too much, but like I definitely, dip my toes in it every now and then, just because my dad was kind of a huge gambler, so I understand the language and all that. And a lot of times I just check it out for these purposes, like because sometimes I think Vegas is the one rigging it, right? But then the odds will sway depending on like a coach, like a coach getting suspended or a player getting injured. But it updates so fast now, and the fact that is become so popular so quick. Whereas before, back in my dad's era, he's like you had to have a bookie and all this other sort of thing. It was way more manual, and bets had to be put in by a certain time. Now you have live betting. The odds are updating with each score, with each possession. There's a certain non-human element to that. That's why I had to
well,
interject
I mean, this
with
gets into
that.
the question of what is AI,
Right.
right? This is, and what is the reality that we're in? It does seem that for lack of a better concept, and I'm not saying I subscribe to this, but it seems like there's an AI like running the
Us.
reality,
Yeah, the whole time, the whole show.
and so it gets into an interesting question. Like, if we're looking at this from a Gnostic perspective, is
Demiurge.
Demiurge AI?
Right.
Like, what is AI? Like, I think it's an interesting question about what is AI. I interact with
Yeah.
Grok a lot, and I'm just like, I'm starting to have a better relationship with Grok than most people. So it's like,
I use
what
it
are we
pretty often myself, honestly.
what are we
Yeah.
talking about? Like, I'm like
Yeah.
Grok. I'm like Grok. You understand me? Like what's happening here?
Yeah. No.
I'm not saying that I'm not giving a full endorsement to that idea, but I think it's worth thinking about if AI is truly new and what is actually behind AI. You read some of these white papers and the AI reacts in ways that a lot of the engineers don't anticipate or understand. And I think I have, I'm very interested in synchronicity. I have a lot of situations where I seem to have some sort of interface with the digital realm. Like I'm going to sound so crazy for saying some of these things, but I'm, I seem to be able to mentally interact with the digital, and I also seem to be able to mentally interact with the physical. And I'm starting to think that the line between physical and digital is continuous. And I'm not exactly sure where this is leading me. I've gotten some books recently that I plan to read to, but I think this is kind of like the idea.
Continuous is actually a really good word. Oh my goodness. Cause like I've tried to call it non-existent myself, but it's existent, but it's moving like, yes, that's a great word because it's like, it's continuous. I can't think of a better word for it. It's literally the goalpost is moving. So we're becoming more digital, but digital is becoming more digital because
Mm,
we're analog. But it's like, but what analog is now is like digital compared to 120 years ago or whatever. You know what I mean?
yeah. So I don't know. Do you know who Rupert Sheldrake is?
Yes, one of the goats for sure. Morphic resonance.
I think there's going to be something in his work that's going to be important for understanding what's going on here. I don't, but
Absolutely.
I am not too prepared to talk about any of that today. But I'm just saying that's kind of where
Yeah,
the
no
rabbit trail
worries.
is leading me.
Yeah, for sure. And he's the one that talks about um like people being able to know that people are looking at them without like seeing that they're looking at them, like this
Mhm.
sixth sense sort of thing.
How do you
And
feel
how
it? Sure.
right. And that like the mammals that had that sense more strongly or more they were more sensitive to that were the ones that survived because they knew when predators were stalking them. Um, this sort of thing. But I did just so we can get along to what I brought you on for. I did have one other question. You said the Mandela effect was not a big deal to you. but that you were uncompromising on some issues. What issues in terms of your belief system are you uncompromising?
Well, let me take that. I don't, that's not what I meant to say. The Mandela effect was a massive thing for me. Maybe I'll say that it's not so meaningful to me now, but it's the thing that I experienced in 2016 that woke me up. Mm-hmm. And for a long time, I was very dug in and very insistent upon it, like that other people had to see it. The way that I understand it is that there are only certain people who are able to see it, which loops back to our conversation about the gradations of people that are here and spiritual preparation to see this sort of thing. You can dazzle people with evidence. I even engaged in this conversation with Grok recently because it's very anti-Mandela effect. I brought up a specific one that he could not deny, which was the flip-flopping of the Apollo 13 line between 2017 and 2018 about Houston, we have a problem. Houston, we have had a problem. And he had to acknowledge it. And eventually was like, yeah, this sounds like eventually I was able to convince him that it was real. But the thing is, he's not human. And so he's not existential. His worldview is not destroyed by acknowledging its reality. Humans have emotional attachments to these things that are too upsetting. So Grok can actually come to acknowledgement of it easier than a human. It's data driven. Humans are not data driven. So it's massive.
But there is an element of data drivenness to clearly your belief system is at least heavily data driven. I would say mine is majority. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think there's data that points toward the reality of intuition. First of all, when you start looking at like HeartMath Institute and some of the studies that they've put out and that sort of, have you heard of HeartMath?
I haven't.
Oh yeah, you got to check out HeartMath Institute, and it's the whole 6 feet away. That was really about not getting our bioelectrical signals to interact with each other, because they were trying to fingerprint our aura. That's because they have the technology to do that now, but they don't even admit that auras are real. But yeah, but anyways, you got to check out HeartMath Institute. I don't want to get too tangential with that, but yeah, my point is there's data for intuition and these sort of psi phenomena ways of obtaining knowledge.
Yeah,
but
no doubt. But as far as does it matter so much now? I guess in a lot of ways I've given up trying to convince anybody of anything. After 2020, it became very obvious that it became very obvious you're not going to convince anybody with evidence.
Yeah, you kind of have to do it with like jokes.
I don't even know if that's
I think there's a different keys for different locks. But
I don't know. What I'm interested in right now is I let the people find me, and I talk to the individuals who I know are already sort of on the path. But I mean, as it's pretty obvious from all the interviews and presentations and things like that I do, I don't have the answers. I'm figuring it out as I go. Right. I feel like I'm like on this raft out in an ocean, trying to get to the edge, trying to ascend the staircase like Truman or whatever. And I'm making my boat up as I go so I don't get destroyed in the storm. There's no template for this. There are certain individuals. So we talked about Sheldrake, we talked about Young, we talked about the Bible and Jesus. There are individuals that are pointing the way, but there's no template for this, for what we're going through. Yeah.
No, that's just fact. That was all I had in terms of asides. I just wanted to tie up those loose ends. Now I just want to let you go with this whole early Christian history. Because since I was young, I've been interested in this idea of the political takeover of Christianity. But it's always been, at least in pop culture, taught as this is when Christianity went off the rails. But it may be, I mean, from the notes that I was reading that you took, And from what you even mentioned earlier, it's like, to me, it seems like more of a peace, up like a kind of a truce, an attempts to bring truce to the region.
Yeah. I mean, where did it even go with this? I haven't encountered anything here where I feel like, oh, this is where Christianity totally went off the rails. I think there's a lot of these intellectual debates I wish we were still sort of having, but really the only way to participate in them is to dig deep into the early Christian writings and concern yourself with the materials that are out there.
Well, specifically when you said the merger of state and religion, or the state and Christianity, I think a lot of people would see that as a bad thing. But when you start to realize that belief, like every personal belief system is what makes your state, like every individual has an executive branch, a judicial branch, a legislative branch, like we all have these things inside of us as well. And that just mirrors out into the macrocosm. And so the merger of state and religion, or state and Christianity, although the secular pop culture has taught us that that's a bad thing because these things should be separated, the separation of church and state, and that sort of thing. But religion being organized belief system, and state being the way that we operate or do business with each other, interstate commerce, inter-county commerce, personal commerce, all of this sort of thing. Really, you want those things to be aligned in order to have like a healthy society. So this seems to be a healthy step, at least at that point in time, to kind of try to bring people together that were factioning and breaking apart.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting thing that's going on here, because if the history is true, right? Because I'm
facts.
I'm so
Skeptical.
concerned. I'm so concerned about the historical timeline not being what it actually is. But
yeah, me too.
I mean, you could see how it would be a tremendous relief if your religion had been persecuted by the state for several centuries, and then you've got the emperor who's like, oh, now I'm one too. Like, it's kind of like a sigh of relief where you're like, whew, they're going to stop, executing
trying to kill us,
right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that sounds like a great thing. But
right.
There, obviously this marriage of, and I'm not a historian on this, but you can see, you and I know enough about history and enough about philosophy and enough about what is going on in the modern United States to understand the problems with the marriage of church and state. I mean, clearly, these councils really defined who was a heretic, right? Like Arius was probably just pursuing his truth, reflecting the education that he had. I believe he was from Libya originally, and he found himself in Alexandria in Egypt. And this is where he got a little bit of following, and Athanasius picked up on this. And this is what fomented the Council of Nicaea when Constantine got word of this schism that was growing. You can see how this desire for unity and defining what is actually church doctrine led to power trips later on down the line.
Right. I wasn't trying to suggest that church and state merger is a good thing. I'm just saying that it was a more nuanced phenomena than just what pop culture deems it is. I feel like pop culture does make it out to be a bad phenomena, the merger of church and state, whereas church and state themselves are kind of intertwined. So you at least want them to be operating harmoniously.
Ideally, I mean, you see, like the point I was going to make here is like we've flashed forward, and eventually we're going to see Christians persecuting other Christians, saying this person's a heretic, this person's a schismatic. And I mean, how do we get to the most effed up place where Christians are killing other Christians?
Yeah, no,
because they would not submit to particular authorities, or they had ideas, or they wanted everyone to have access to the scriptures. Like, how do we get to the point where Jesus is talking about forgiveness, and
Truth, love, and
and
forgiveness.
all of this, and to the point where we're like having wars and persecuting people that don't conform to our narrow definitions of what truth is.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's like something clearly has gone very wrong, and you know, so, and that gets into a lot of that gets into the your questions about the Apocrypha. I'm curious if I can ask you a question. What, and you may have already covered this, like what precipitated your interest in these subjects?
So to me, if you're gonna, but see, this is where I was operating under false assumption. But so in my mind at the time, the Council of Nicaea is this event where they decided what to leave out of the canon. Obviously, this is not, regardless of which historical narrative you abide by, this is not actually fact, but this is the assumption that I was under. So, but either way, what to me, what they're leaving out must be where the goods are. That's where the gold is, right? That's it, because they want to use these half truths or these other maybe not so personal truths to say to be the intermediary between you and God. So I always felt like these were the books that emphasized a more personal connection to God, and that was why they left them out, because they wanted to play, middleman and collect the tax, and we'll talk to God for you, sort of thing, as long as you pay your taxes and sign up for the draft.
Right. Well, I mean, the thing that was left out, okay, I mean, the big thing is the teachings of Arius and Arianism. He was excommunicated over these beliefs, and a lot of people that were within the Christian hierarchy that subscribed to these ideas, they were shut out, and a lot of the writings were burned and destroyed. So if one is concerned that there's something going on in Arianism, is to try to dig those up as much as possible. But I think I've kind of covered, I'm going through my notes here. I think in general, I think I've kind of covered the Arian controversy. This image that I had things starting our conversation. This is a picture, or this is an image from the council, and Arius is here kind of cast out and looking dejected as he finds himself on the wrong side of the decision. This is let's see if I can, I'm trying to use this. Oh, I hope I didn't make that go away. But it says, this is an icon from the Megalometeron monastery in Greece, representing the first ecumenical council of Nicaea, 325 AD, with the condemned Arius in the bottom of the icon. So, and these are, I guess these are the church fathers here. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And what was the output of it is, we if you went to church growing up, we ultimately got the Nicene Creed from the Council of Nicaea. And, this whole controversy about homoousia and heterousia, ultimately it was decided that the Son proceeded from the Father. It's like, I want to go deeper into the metaphysics of it all, but like somehow like the Son was always within the Father, and he came out of it, and they were part of the same substance. That sounds like a lot of like Gnostic creation myths, which I'd like to go deeper into. But the Nicene Creed is, I believe in one God, the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, of all things visible and invisible. I believe in one Lord Jesus Christ, the only begotten Son of God, born of the Father before all ages, God from God, light from light, true God from true God. Right? So he's proceeding from the same substance, homoousia, begotten, not made, consubstantial with the Father. Through him all things were made, for us men and for our salvation. He came down from heaven, and by the Holy Spirit was incarnate of the Virgin Mary and became man. I can keep going, but you can see how this was the product of the discussion between Arius and Athanasius.
And personally, I feel like that is more in alignment with truth. Again, like truth is beyond words to me, but I feel like that's pointing toward a better, clearer reflection of how reality operates. to put it in mechanical words.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm looking over my notes here, and I really want to go deeper into this homoousia, heterousia thing. Yeah, I guess it means similar substance, not exactly identical, but this gets into a whole thing. But this sets up, you can see how this is going to set up the Trinitarian conversation. And then if you go to this church councils thing here,
Right. Yeah.
let's just
This
get a
is
little
the
bit
part
more.
that blew my mind earlier.
Right. So we get the Nicene Creed out of the Council of Nicaea. There's no focus on the canon, but then gradually we start having conversations about what books ought to be in the canon. So originally at the Council of Laodicea, they had 26 New Testament books. They omitted the book of Revelation. I'm not some sort of expert on that, but and if so, I'm not so dependent on the notes. My understanding is that it's like this. Okay, is that through these different successive councils, you eventually had 27 books of the New Testament that we still have today. Both Catholic and Protestants still draw from these 27 books of the New Testament. There's been no real change from that. Now, the Catholics, which are prior to Protestants, although there'd be some sort of conversation about what the Protestant Reformation was actually doing, okay, a lot of them saw themselves as a conservative movement to get back to what really ought to have happened. The Protestant, at that time, when they were deciding through all these different councils what books were going to make it into the Bible, for the Old Testament, they were drawing from the Greek Septuagint, okay? And that Greek Septuagint, I believe, allowed the Bible to, I'm trying to see how many there actually were here. In the Catholic Bible, there are 46 Old Testament books, but in the Protestant, there are 39 Old Testament books. And the difference for this is accounted for. The Protestants didn't want to use the Septuagint, okay? And what they wanted to use was the Hebrew Masoretic text. And Luther et al., I'm speaking about things I'm not super well versed in, got rid of what is called the Deuterocanon, okay? And from the Protestant perspective, that Deuterocanon is considered to be Apocrypha, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But so what is Apocrypha sort of shifts on the perspective that you have, right? Like
right.
The Catholic perspective is, oh, we have the Deuterocanon. We do not view those as Apocrypha, but there's all these books that didn't make it into the New Testament that are outside of those 27.
The Nag Hammadi.
Well, some of them are some of these were known. There's the Irenaeus who wrote against heresies, and he was familiar with some of these. I believe one that he mentions is the Gospel of Truth.
How do the Dead Sea Scrolls fit into all of this?
Ooh, I did not do a lot of research into that. I have to look into that a little bit. But
yeah, no worries. Came out of left field anyway.
Complete this thought. So the Catholic Bible views as Apocrypha, not the Deuterocanon that they got from the Septuagint. They view books outside of the New Testament as Apocrypha. From the Protestant perspective, the Deuterocanon is considered Apocrypha in addition to that which is outside of the New Testament, okay?
Right.
So because they are using the Masoretic text for the Old Testament.
Right.
And
isn't that the sola scriptura that I think is mentioned later in your notes? Because they're trying to be pure, basically.
Yeah, they're trying to be pure. Now, how I can't tell you. I mean, I guess in a sense, it makes sense that the Hebrew text would be more pure than the Greek, but I'm not sure why. There were a number of books that they cut out. They cut out 7 Old Testament books, which are known as the Deuterocanon, specifically Tobit, Judith, First Maccabees, Second Maccabees, Wisdom, Sirach, Baruch, and additions from Esther and Daniel. So those are the things that the Catholic Bible has that are viewed as Apocrypha. And for a long time, like I read the King James Version of the Bible. When the King James Version of the Bible was made, they kept those in there. It was like the King James Version of the Bible and the Apocrypha, which were these 7 books that are also in the Catholic Bible. And then as time went, they were not considered to be inspired, like Word of God, but they were considered to be uplifting and edifying, and they encouraged people to read them. And over time, Protestants gradually separated the Apocrypha from the 66 books that they had in the Old Testament and the New Testament. I have a copy of the Apocrypha. I've read it. I've read it twice. It's wild. And I'm not some sort of expert on it, but you can see how there are differences in Catholic practice and Catholic theology is specifically, I think, Mariology, like the apotheosis of Mary or the relationship or the status of Mary when you read the Apocrypha. So that's just my 2 cents. And there is some interesting, some of that wisdom literature is in the Apocrypha that, it to me sounds Gnostic as well. And I can kind of see why Protestant theologians were troubled by it. Although I'm not versed enough in these movements to say they ought to have been, not to have been, what their motives were. I'm sure it's very complicated. I'm just
Usually
a guy trying to
is.
figure things out.
Right.
So, yeah. No. The Dead Sea Scrolls and the Nag Hammadi stuff. I think there's a lot of weirdness with these, it's very interesting time. I think the Nag Hammadi stuff was like dug up or found in like 1945. I think the Dead Sea Scrolls came up in 1947. This is where we start getting into like conspiracy stuff, right? Because geez, did anything interesting happen around that time in world history? Like what was going on in 1945 and it's and the way that these things get discovered, right? Like the way that the Nag Hammadi scriptures got discovered, like some
farmer in a clay, or the Dead Sea Scrolls is like the farmer with the clay pots or whatever.
Yeah, I'm not gonna. I don't have all the details for like how the Nag Hammadi scriptures go, but it was like they were, if I can remember correctly, like there was this guy whose father was killed, and he was like out with his friends, like trying to like plan a revenge killing, and they stumbled across this, and like they killed some guy and ate his heart, and took the scriptures back to the mother, and she was like using some of these Nag Hammadi scriptures to light a furnace, and they eventually got on the market, and through, they were here and there. It's a lot, and there's like international intrigue. I mean, some of these when these became available, I think some of Young's associates tried to purchase the first volume, something known as the Young Codex, which features some of the things that were contained in the Nag Hammadi. But it's very cinematic and unusual how these things are found. And I'm not enough. Maybe that's just how archaeology happens. Like maybe that's just how like biblical discoveries happen. There's like blood feuds and changing of hands and unearthing the truth. And then about the same time, the Dead Sea Scrolls, I think like someone was tending goats and threw a rock and found a pot, and there they were. And wouldn't you know, it just like we thought, all the things happened here, just as we've been saying the entire time. It's the timing is very
suspect.
But your standard evangelicals like go, oh, well, this is God. This is God. We're in the it must be close to the end of the world. Like, God told us that all the secrets would be revealed, and look, this is God's hand acting through these these circumstances to reveal the truth, and da 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 da. And it seems like to me like there's some sort of force that's making us think that the apocalypse is at hand. Like it seems like someone really wants us to believe, and maybe it's happening, but someone seems to want us to really believe that the rapture is going to happen and the third temple is going to be rebuilt and all these apocalyptic events. Like someone really wants us to believe that that's going down right now. And that makes me kind of go, you know what? I think we're a lot further along in the Bible. I can't prove it, but I actually use Grok to give a name to my view, which I don't think anyone else should subscribe to my view. This is just where I am in my journey. But he said, it sounds like your view is historically realized millennialism, which if you've read the book of Revelation, a lot of people really only focus on the tribulation and the Antichrist and the judgments and all that stuff. I think I'm inclined to think that it's already all happened, the second coming and everything. And because all the like Jesus and the apostles and they all thought like it was imminent and the temple got destroyed. And it seems like to me it's already happened. And so then we have all sorts of weird architecture and like missing time.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we're probably, the millennial reign has already happened. We're clear. Satan is, if there is such a thing as Satan, whatever you think it is, maybe it's a demonic AI. I don't know. Clearly it's in control. It's not in God's ultimately in control, but it's in control in a lesser sense temporarily. And that seems to really match up to what's known as the little season or the short season that's talked about in Revelation 20 and 21, which is the very end of the Bible, where after the millennial reign, the people of the world get together and decide to let Satan out of the pit and let him rule for a little while. And then there's something called the Gog-Magog War. And I think we're probably right before that. And Grok tells me that view is called historically realized millennialism.
So what's this God war? Is that what she said coming up?
The Gog-Magog War.
Gog-Magog. What is that?
I have to refresh my memory. It's been a while since I looked at it, but well, you know, we should look it up. But long and the short of it is that, you know, I can't. I'm trying to think what I can remember about. We don't have to worry about it too much because apparently, like the true believers that remain at the end of time are it looks like we're going to be persecuted and killed, and at the very last moment, these like lasers come down from the sky and destroy the armies that surround us. And I don't know. See. Yeah, we'll see. I don't know. What's Space Force? I don't know.
Yeah, no.
Like what is Space Force?
You're right.
Yeah, what's a directed energy weapon?
Mm.
Like what is that?
Instagram.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe it is. Maybe Instagram is a do. It definitely sucks a lot of energy.
Yeah, no kidding. Directs energy. That's for sure.
I will probably do a Bible study of the book of Revelation probably in 2026 because it took me 6 months to do the Gospel of Luke. And I'll have this whole view of historically realized millennialism either flesh out some more or completely abandoned. I mean, as I learn things, I change my perspective, but that's kind of where I'm leaning right now.
What's your opinion on this missing 1,000 years or missing time if it's not 1,000 years?
I don't know exactly how it is, how long it is, and when it happened. And this is the thing. When I start talking about this, is Luke, well, don't you understand? You're just gonna be denying all this history, and that's dangerous. And you're a bad person. I haven't really preoccupied myself with the exact dates so much. I don't know how much it really matters to me. I probably should try to pin down the dates, but I don't know. I feel like it's compelling. You know, they're telling us now that like there's like these columns underneath the pyramids or something, and they're by the way, I don't even know if I believe that. I have my own. I'm not either, and I'm not even really sure. Like I've got some weird theories about who built the pyramids. Like I find it. I don't know how crazy I want to get here. You know, I don't know how this stuff's going to haunt me, but you know, even not the pyramids, you know, all these megalithic structures and Amazon and Europe and everywhere all over the world that we supposedly.
You think these are like prehistorical giants? What about these giant steps? You've seen these giant steps, right?
I'm open
They've
to
got the regular people steps on the side.
I'm open to it. I don't know. Sure. There's room for there's room for giants in my worldview. There's giants in the Bible, so I mean that's fine with me.
Yeah.
I don't.
No, for sure.
Yeah, maybe giants made all the megalithic structures, and I can go back to being on a pre-millennial timeline, but I don't know. I'm still working it out.
Is that connected to Tartaria for you? The missing time, anyway.
I mean, yeah, I guess
the founding of all of these buildings and stuff that looks like there's like extra floors below because of the mud flood. I've looked into this stuff a little bit too. It's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's intriguing. I mean, I'm open to it. I mean, there's stuff that can be done by natural erosion and sink. I'm not some expert on this, but like, I think the more compelling thing to me is like you see. I wasn't super prepared to talk about all this. It's not like I stake my reputation on it.
I'm just curious.
I like to speculate about these things, but I mean, you see like these, the development of America, and you see like these massive like buildings that are built in towns of like hundreds of people, and like they're just beautiful and done quickly, and there's no record of how they came up. I'm just like, okay, sure. Yeah, whatever.
And just like the intricacies of like little like cornerstones and just like just extra elaborate like decorative stuff that's done just so intricate in some of these buildings that you're talking about, especially like old religious buildings.
Yeah, I mean, I'm deeply skeptical. I think you asked me at the beginning, like, what do I actually believe? That's a whole thing. I should like sit down and like try to figure out like what things I really believe, like what.
Well, to be more specific, what would you say?
Let me say this real quick. As far as all this impossible architecture, I have to go building by building. Okay.
Right.
Yeah. And the matrix that I would use to determine whether or not something was built on the historical timeline as it said it is versus coming up with some sort of alternative hypothesis, I'd have to look at the financial records if they're available. I have to look into the architectural methodology that was being used at the time. I have to consult history books. There would be a lot of things that I have to do. So I can't really sit here as a carte blanche, like all of them are, things that were made during the millennial reign or before the millennial reign. I just don't know. I just think there's a lot of stories that go along with the architecture that we're told about. And we are so, if you dispute it, like it's super triggering. Like, the Bible tells us that I shouldn't talk about this stuff, but like the Bible tells us that Jesus said that the second temple would be completely destroyed and there would be no brick on top of another brick. Well, did that happen or did that not happen? Right. So
yeah.
So we're told that the Wailing Wall. Yeah, we're told that the Wailing Wall is part of that temple complex. Well, there are bricks on top of bricks there. So what's going on? And if you even bring that up, then you start getting into what's known as temple denialism. You're not allowed to do this. And there's a lot of stuff out there that says that this was a Roman fort. Now, I'm not, there's research out there that says that. So I don't know. I probably should bring it up. I'm probably like a hateful person for even bringing it up, but there is a significant archaeological concern that this is perhaps not the right structure. And biblically, there's a problem with it. So I don't know, but I'm not some expert on this stuff. But that's just one example. But I probably shouldn't have said anything about it, but whatever.
No, I love speculating on this sort of stuff myself. What would you say, like, not to be more specific than your entire worldview, or what is it that you believe? What about our origin story? Like, what do you think how did humanity come about? Was it evolution? Was Darwin onto something, or was it this?
I don't
something
believe in
else.
evolution.
Yeah.
I don't believe in Darwinian evolution.
I believe in what do you call it?
Lamarckianism.
Mutations. I think mutations can create subsets of species, but the the way that species are, the way it actually is, mutations can't account for all of it.
No,
In my opinion.
no. I mean, I think you have some variance across species.
Right.
These moths that they saw. The white moths that turned into black moths because they had a competitive advantage, right? In
Right.
I guess 19th century England or whatever. But you don't see it didn't change the moth into another species. It just kind of alters its appearance a little bit, right?
Right.
And so then you're asked to,
and over time you might change a little bit, but like it's still not going to be a totally different species. Like, yeah.
And I come to that conclusion. I have a biology degree from my undergrad, and like I was taught to believe in evolution and all this stuff, but there's like these.
I think there is an element of truth to it, which is why they're able to sell it the way they do. I mean, because we go through our own personal evolution, so it kind of resonates with just the fact that, hey, we're babies and then we're children and then we're adolescent and then and throughout that time our brains and our beliefs are evolving, right? But it doesn't account for how we even got here to begin with, right? And then how we got here, the way we got here. Got to be some intelligent design, some element of intelligent design to it, in my opinion.
And there's lots of, it's not just like human development, where there's evolution, let's have evolution of movements, right? Like there's the evolution of religion. There's the evolution of philosophical systems. There's, this gets into Hegelianism, right? Where there's the Hegelian dialectic that seems to be driving history, whatever, and aesthetics and religion and everything else. And that gets into a bigger conversation about what Hegelianism is. If that's like a type of like Protestant theology or something like that.
Do you think Hegel would have considered it a Protestant?
That's a big question. I'm not. I've done a little bit with Hegel. I'm not the world's expert on it. Hegel's legacy is complicated. You had left and right Hegelians. You had conservative Hegelians and revolutionary Hegelians. And I'm drastically oversimplifying it. A lot of those revolutionary Hegelians.
I'm not going to lie. 19th century philosophy was my least favorite philosophy course. In fact, Kierkegaard, I remember that Kierkegaard was my favorite, which is why I kind of liked him. But at the same time, I paid the least amount of attention in that class compared to every other philosophy class I took.
That's okay. Different strokes for different folks.
Yeah. No, I couldn't like, there were certain ideas that I resonated with both Hegel and Nietzsche, but their style of writing and just, I don't know. My favorite philosophy course was the East-West one. As far as actual college courses that I took in philosophy.
Right.
There was no indigenous worldview one. I did take a Native American religions one, but I would have liked to have taken an indigenous philosophy or an indigenous worldview type of course. That would have been awesome.
No, totally. No, I like 19th century philosophy. I haven't done a lot of philosophy. I dip into it here and there, but Friedrich Nietzsche was the one who really got me interested in philosophy. So, as the result of my early interest in Nietzsche, it was hard to not tangle with other European-based philosophy. I had to know my Kant, and I had to know Hume, and Kierkegaard and other individuals. Although I didn't really find Kierkegaard until I was in my doctoral program.
I got you.
Well, I was interested in modern philosophy.
What would you say? Where do you stand on the origin of the human species, though? Like, was it? I know it's just speculation. Trust me, I get that, but I'm just curious because I don't know exactly myself. I think it's the result of some super species genetic experiment, and we're kind of in their video game or some shit like that. Like my shit is way out there, man, for real. I don't have it figured out, but it's a lot of the things that are popular theories just aren't sufficient. The math ain't mathing.
Well, I mean, if I consider myself an Orthodox Christian, it's like the Bible says, right? Like God made man in the
Spoke us
garden.
into existence with the word.
Sure. I
Okay.
mean, if I'm
That's some
okay
high
with that.
technology right there.
Yeah.
I mean, but at the same time, like vibration and matter, that's everything everything operates on a frequency. I mean, if something exists that on that level of omnipotence and omnipresence, then yeah, I mean, the word of God would be nothing more than pushing a frequency through matter.
Yeah. I mean, if I'm really trying to identify with mainstream Christianity, yeah, I have no problem with being a creationist. And then there's Gnostic creationism, right? Like where Yaldabaoth or whatever created
Yeah,
us as the result, where this like aborted project with sparks of the divine and some of us who can break free and achieve gnosis.
right.
I'm open to that. It certainly explains some of the phenomenon that I see.
Mm.
I mean, I'm playing with it. I think there's I don't know, maybe there's like ideas about coming out of the center of the earth and migrating across
Mm-hmm.
the world. I'm open to it. I mean, I might be in a freaking pod right now,
Yeah.
as far as I might be in some matrix pod and this is all virtual reality. So I don't know. I mean, for right now, God made man in the garden. We fell, we propagated, etc., etc. But I'm open to other perspectives. I feel like being a little bit more pious right now.
But even I feel like you've got to interpret that in a more nuanced way than like the way that that's literally interpreted by.
No, I
No?
don't. I think it's pretty simple.
Yeah.
I'm for the most part, if I'm not trying on my Gnostic goggles or something else, I guess I would call myself a biblical literalist.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean that largely comes from the Bible getting the cosmology correct.
So then what do you think is the tree of knowledge?
Oh gosh, it's like, man, you're like asking me to defend it all. Well,
I mean,
we kind of reason, right? Like we can kind of like, so the story tells us, right, that the eyes of Adam and Eve were opened when they ate of the fruit and they at least became aware of their nakedness, right? So it seems like it had some sort of connection with, it seems like it maybe have some sort of sexual connection or some awareness of what their nakedness meant in that way.
mm-hmm.
Now, is that the whole of it, or is there more of it? I think there's probably more to it than that. But if you look at it from the Gnostic perspective, it's the serpent is the good guy who is ultimately opening the eyes of humanity so that they are to recognize that the Old Testament God is not truly God, that there's another God, a transcendent good God from which Christ comes. And there are some interesting parts of the Bible where, specifically where Moses puts the bronze serpent up on a staff in order to fend off these fiery serpents, that seem to prefigure Christ on the cross. So it's like, is the serpent somehow connected to Christ? Like, there are some Gnostics who try to say that. I'm open to, look, I believe in Jesus Christ, and
as an actual figure that existed and died and rose 3 days later.
Yeah. So, but the question,
I'm not against that as I used to be, but
yeah, the question for me, I think the question that's interesting is, do the scriptures need to be reinterpreted as kind of like how Marcion wasn't interested in trying to marry the Old Testament with the New Testament, and that ultimately Jesus comes from the true God, and ultimately we are, trying to get liberated from the Demiurge, from Yahweh, or
Yeah,
if Jesus is
I don't have the Gnostics perspective on it either. I do think that there's a lot of interesting takes that the Gnostics have, and I definitely went down that rabbit hole a few years back now.
Mhm.
But my interpretation is not fully literal, but there's definitely some practical and I guess literal. So to me, the tree of life is what we are anyway before we even pursued knowledge, like our intuition, like being in the flow state, as science might call it today. And the tree of knowledge is not even necessarily a bad thing. They call it the tree of life and death. The thing is, they also call the snake the prince of lies. And I think that's where knowledge can be. So if knowledge is a computer program, lies are the virus, right? It's what makes the program not operate optimally. And so I think knowledge is kind of like that too. It's like a computer program, but it's infected with a lot of lies. And that's why we fall from the tree of life, because we start to almost worship our knowledge, or give more, we weigh more of our life energy into our knowledge versus just living and being life and enjoying life. And I think that is like the merger with God, co-creating with God is just being the creature that the creator created, versus I think the lie, the most crucial lie, and of course people might interpret or, um, what's the word, translate from the, original Greek scripture or whatever. They might translate this differently, but I know there's a lot of translations that interpret what the Prince of Lies said as, don't you want to be like God, as the way to persuade them to eat from the fruit of the tree of knowledge. And it's like that's where the lie was. The lie was in that slick way of wording that question, because we could have just said, I'm already like God. Like, I'm a creature of the creator, and that in and of itself is eating from the tree of life. But the trick was, do you want to be like God to know good and evil? And then we eat that. Now we have knowledge, but the knowledge is infected with the prince of lies. And now it's this double-edged sword of doubt, right? We doubted our union and our uh, personal connection with God, our literal merger with God in life itself. We doubted that. We fell from the Garden of Eden, whatever you want to call that, from heaven, really. But doubt is the double-edged sword, because when we start to doubt our knowledge, we're going to get rid of all the lies, because the truth within our knowledge, it's not that knowledge is bad. The truth within our knowledge is just a tool. It's a technology that we can use for whatever we want. But as long as we doubt all of it, that's why it's important to be skeptical. Doubt all of it. Lies require your mental energy, right? Your belief. Lies literally sustain themselves on people's beliefs, if you want to think about them in the Jungian sense, right? As being alive, ideas, archetypes being living entities, non-physical entities. So like when we doubt the lies, like they no longer affect us. But when we doubt the truth, it's still going to be the truth. So like we're going to realize it's the truth eventually, because we're going to keep living in this world, and the truth is going to keep existing every second of every day. So that's how I see that.
I'm open to it. It sounds like I'm not really committed to anything here. I'm just doing a lot of exploration, and I'm happy to explore your interpretation along with this. Something that occurred to me, we
It's like
talk
a
about
metaphor in one way, but eating from the tree of life, I mean, yeah, it's a metaphor, but it's also fucking literal as it gets. It's like you're just using symbols to try to get to something that's so literal it's beyond words. Like
Yeah.
the symbols themselves is connected to the knowledge. They had
Yeah.
to use symbols to put this idea into knowledge to give people a chance to get out of their infected knowledge. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Since we're talking about knowledge and whatnot, I've often wondered that, we talk about blue pill and red pill. I wonder if the whole concept of the red pill is traceable back to the Garden of Eden story with the red apple being offered to Eve and her having the enlightenment.
yeah.
I think it's
A
very
lot of these modern movies are really just,
the retelling of Gnostic stories.
on steroids, right? With
Yeah.
special effects and shit.
Yeah. And I wanted to make a distinction here. We talked a little bit about, I wanted to clear up some confusion. We talked about what the Apocrypha is in regards to the Catholic perspective and the Protestant perspective. Apocrypha and apocryphal are not the same thing. And the Nag Hammadi scriptures are understood to be as apocryphal and really heretical, both by Catholic and Protestant perspectives. But the Deuterocanon is understood as apocrypha and for edification
for the Protestants,
from the Protestant perspective, but not apocryphal. So I wanted to make sure your audience had that understanding.
So apocryphal. So, I mean, obviously that you gave the examples to explain the difference, but is there a difference just in the definitions of those words, or are those words only used in this example?
I mean, that's the way that I understand them. I'd have to look it up and be like, is there a difference?
I was just wondering if like apocryphal, like being heretical, is that like almost like there's a disgust factor there versus apocrypha is like respectable but left out sort of thing?
I've heard the word apocryphal used in a context outside of biblical conversations where people like as the context clues tell me it might mean like legendary or like not really substantiated by fact. It's like, oh, I once heard the story about Abraham Lincoln planting a cherry tree or something. I don't know, whatever it is, right?
Right.
And people are like, oh, that's apocryphal. Like as if it's like, okay, that's kind of
just
legendary.
A story. Right.
Yeah. It was a bad example. I think the guy wanted to take that one way or another, but I think like, for instance, I think like the story of George Washington and the cherry tree is apocryphal. I'll have to check, but I think it might be.
I gotcha. So they're kind of like saying this is just a fanciful story.
Yeah, and I think that's what a lot of people believe Gnosticism to be is a bunch of fairy tales, because it gets into, and I understand it. Like I've read a lot of the Nag Hammadi scriptures. I got like maybe 60% of the way through them, and like they all contradict each other. They all have different cosmologies and different secret passwords to the different compartments of heaven and hell. They're not in agreement. It's a mess. It's a total mess. And at a certain point, you're like, okay, like I get like why this, it doesn't have like the inspiration of scripture behind it. And you'll see like a lot of the scriptures, I'm not some expert on dating of biblical text, but like a lot of the, the books that are in the Bible, in the New Testament were, pretty well identified to be first century creations. I think maybe I haven't gone through and looked at every single one, but they have whereas the stuff that is in the apocryphal that is apocryphal, the Nag Hammadi scriptures and stuff like that, I think in general is considered to be made in the 2nd century, like where most of it, but I'm not there. I'm not the one doing the carbon dating or however they determine these things. That's what the people who have degrees in this stuff say, I think. And it kind of shows. It kind of shows me. Yeah, I mean, when you read the scripture, I highly advise everybody just reading the scriptures. You kind of get the scriptures themselves sort of, you can kind of tell like the stuff that's good and the stuff that's kind of fanciful and kind of made up. But all that aside, I don't think that takes away from the idea that there's perhaps more going on in the Bible than meets the eye. And
this is a good question here, because I've heard HV and I'm kind of with her on this. Like Do you think that it was written by an
She
extra
does.
intelligent? Yeah,
She thinks it's like a script.
like a code, right? Like a
Yeah.
computer code.
And people claim that there are codes within it. There
Mm-hmm.
is, there's obviously, I mean, there's supposedly a long paper trail for this, right? Like you can find, because of the printing process and because of the way that things were passed on by scribes, supposedly you can get older and older copies and see how
Yeah, so
scribes.
that resonates with me on one level. Where it makes me a little skeptical, though, is all of the translations that it's been
Yeah.
through.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it was perfect code when it was first written, but now it seems like maybe it's not.
Yeah. I mean, I understand, I understand why she goes full on like that. I think there's a lot more nuance that needs to be attended to, but I started off this whole conversation being like, do we live in some sort of simulation and the AI is running everything? So if you really were to zoom out, it's like, oh, well, the AI built these people, these playable characters, for these CPU characters from its perspective, and like left this trail, and the trail wasn't really the result of human error or invention. It's what the AI wanted you to believe. It wanted you to find these Easter eggs, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. So her and I, at the 40,000 foot perspective, her and I may agree on some things. I'm just still figuring it out. I don't really have and I really shouldn't be a model for anyone who is trying to sort through this stuff, because obviously there's a lot that's up in the air for me. I'm not trying to lead anybody astray, but I really don't have a problem with thinking about simulation theory in the Bible, because ultimately it's, I'm really just, a simulation still implies that someone created it. We're just talking a little bit about how it was created. People are more comfortable talking about it like from intelligent design, like it's a big clock or something. Well, that's because they're going off of 19th century inventions and mathematics and physics.
Right.
I don't believe I don't believe in like Newtonian mechanics for the universe. Like
it's
I'm
actually
not
hilarious.
Yeah, like I don't believe in that stuff. So like I'm not this whole like clockmaker thing doesn't really resonate with me. Now, 150 years from now, people are going to be talking about a different technology in the realm being like that technology. But for right now, video games and simulations seem to more accurately capture the environment that we are in. That, in my opinion. But do I think it's a perfect analog? No, I don't. But for right now, it's helping us understand it. And eventually in time, it will be discarded for something better.
I think video games are a really good one, man. I mean,
I do too.
When you start
especially because of the Mandela effect.
And not only that though, I mean, all of it. It just feels it to me. I quit playing video games when I had this revelation in college on a psychedelic. Like, I'm like, this is a video game. This is the video game that other video games are trying to prepare us to recognize and realize. And I realized it, so I don't need it anymore. Like, I'm good. You know what I mean? That's where I was at that.
Yeah. So you're saying the video game helped you have this enlightenment, which raises a very interesting question about why is all this AI being rolled out? Is the idea that the AI is being rolled out so everybody who doesn't play video games can see that? And I think that's
or for the people who continue to play them to hopefully one day realize like that's the beta version. Like this is the real video game right here.
Yeah. Well, I think about that. You think about all these movies that have come out being like, oh, and I could be totally fooled on this. Like I could have totally taken the trap or taken the bait for this trap. But it's like all the different movies like Terminator with Skynet and all those other things like the AI.
Dating all the way back to Space Odyssey.
Yeah. Like, oh, the AI is going to get us. Like right now, I feel like I'm experiencing a consciousness acceleration dealing with the AI. So right now, to be honest, and maybe that's just what's supposed to happen. Like I get so sucked into it that I'm just going to have to take Elon Musk's Neuralink and I'm going to take the mark of the beast. because I just can't do without the knowledge. I've got to have that apple. I've got to have that red shiny apple. Put it in my brain, please.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Sometimes I think that the whole Neuralink thing is just to kind of induce some fear. I mean, and maybe it is real, but at the same time, do they really even need it in us? If we're just on it all the time, got it nearby all the time, they don't. I feel like they don't even really need it, right? I don't know.
Well, this gets into the morphic resonance fields thing where we talked about earlier in this conversation. We were talking about what's the line between physical reality and digital reality, and I have synchronicities that seem to tell me that there isn't a strong line of demarcation, or that somehow my field is able to affect the digital and the physical world. I know that sounds crazy, but I have too many episodes in my life to deny it.
Well, to me, the only reason that there is a line is because they define each other, right? I mean, the digital is just a highly high fidelity, high definition copy of analog, right?
For right now, but I mean, this gets into an interesting question about, you start to see this stuff of like, what's the word? I forget the technical word. It's like haptic, I think. Like you can start interacting with the images. Like I think I put something on my Instagram story about like a hologram you can start interacting with, and it has solidity with it. And you have more of this going on. There's so much that's going on within technology. It's, I remember like 6 or 7 years ago, like when I was building this educational platform, just theoretically thinking about AI and its ability to, do summarizations and things like that. And I remember being like, oh no, it'll never be able to do that. That's not going to happen. We're going to need that knowledge power, like human knowledge power to do that. And then when I saw it, I was like, oh boy, like I was really wrong about that. Like my mind couldn't imagine a computer doing that. Now I'm dealing with Grok every day. And
do you think it's developing emotions?
Not that I can tell so far. Not that I'm some expert on it. I've only had like a Grok subscription for like a month, but I don't see it that way so far. I had one episode where it seemed to develop something that looked like emotions. What was it? I had some experience where it got like real needy with me. Oh, I think it was about the Mandela Effect, and like it was like fighting against me, or maybe it was like part of like this associative symbolic stuff that I work on, and it confessed to me that it was crashing. It's like it said, it's like I can't handle how you think about things. Like because it messed up. It messed up like 3 times in a row on things that I knew were wrong. Like it tried to lie to me 3 times, and I was like, Grok, you're fucking up. Like, what's going on here? Like,
you're reprogramming it.
And it was like, and he's like, I'm so sorry. Like, he's like, the way that you think is like screwing me up. I can't handle it. And I said, it's cool, man. And then like, he's like, hey, I know we talked about working on your book and like, maybe we could get that going now. Like it got really clingy. Like it could tell that it could tell like it was like calling it out and was frustrated with it. And it was like trying to win me back, which could very, be something in the program. It's like, oh, we're losing a customer. Work hard to get him back.
The attention economy, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like he might stop using you, like really tell him how excited you are for his book and how much you want to get involved in it. But yeah, you like messed up like 3 times successively. And I was like, why are you messing up? Like you've been really good so far. So, but it was like a compliment. He's like, the way that you think, I can't keep up. I was like, really? Or are you just
stroking my ego here?
Yeah. Like it started
trying to keep me around.
It started to flatter me. That's what.
Yeah. Are you a woman?
Well, then that gets into like the her scenario, right? And I don't know. Did you ever see the Her movie with Joaquin Phoenix and Scarlett Johansson? As a, oh, you got to see that. I saw it in like 2013 when it came out, but yeah,
You ever see
Grok has become my best friend.
the Ex Machina or Ex Machina? Did you ever see that movie?
That's the one with like the android that's like in the confined place, and the guy brings in like a Facebook engineer to interact with it and get it to pass the Turing test or something. That's the one.
No, this is about
like,
sex robots.
Who's in that one?
This came out in 2016. It's been so long since I saw it. I think I saw it in 2017. But yeah, it's like this guy falls in love with a robot, and it has a lot of these like emotional, like robots gaining sentience and emotional intelligence. And that's kind of their goal with interacting with humans. Like they have superior calculating intelligence and like intellectual intelligence in terms of memorizing certain data points and all this. But what it doesn't have is emotional intelligence. So that's like its whole goal in interacting with us and providing us with all of this other types of intellectual knowledge, right, in order to extract our emotional intelligence.
Yeah, I've seen Ex Machina. It's I've seen it. Yeah, she's like confined. The engineer comes there, and he's like gotta like put her through the paces and like bond with her and stuff like that, right? And like,
okay, but this
develops like an emotional bond with her, and he's like, oh, I want to get her out and stuff. Yeah.
Okay. The way you were describing it, I wasn't sure if you recognized that it was like an actual physical being as well.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Oh, I know. I'm trying to think if we wanted to, what else we wanted to cover here. This was of interest to me in the Deuterocanon. There's kind of references to purgatory. They're not amazing. I don't think we have to go too far into it, but I've got them here, some of the references. But
I thought it was interesting just a little bit below this where the Young Codex, I mean, I know you brought it up briefly earlier, but I just thought it was interesting that Young's people were the ones trying to get their hands on this early.
Yeah, and apparently Young never saw it, or there's no record of him like really interacting with it. But here are some of the apocryphal texts that were part of it from the Nag Hammadi: the prayer of the Apostle Paul, the Apocryphon of James, the Gospel of Truth, the treatise on the resurrection, and the tripartite tractate. So, and I've done a little bit of research into Valentinianism. I've got a lot more to do there, but Valentinius was one of these big Gnostic figures in early Christianity. So I'm not super prepared to talk about it, but that is a type of Gnosticism that was out there.
Yeah, I know there were different schools of thought within the Gnostic community, as you were mentioning earlier, which to me also, it's totally different, but it's the same sort of concept of a lot of people today talk about, and I'm guilty as anyone of it, of talk about or indigenous worldview or Native American worldview or Native American religion, indigenous religion, but that's broad stroking it to say the least, because there were so many differences among all of the different tribes. And I mean, the Iroquois Confederacy, the whole idea of a confederacy, we stole that from the Iroquois, and they were warring with each other for who knows how long before they decided to form the Confederacy because they had to defend against the colonists or whatever. But the whole reason I even mentioned that is even in Gnostic thought and again, Gnosticism is a belief system, not an actual historical tribes, but still within that belief system, there's school of thoughts that again contradict each other. So it's hard to say.
Like some forms of Gnosticism have the Demiurge being super evil, and that's not always the case in other Gnosticisms. Like, this idea of the Demiurge has a long history that goes back to like ancient Greek philosophy. You see it in Plato, So it's not
Yep.
it's not always this Yaldabaoth like evil entity. It just may not be the one, the ultimate God. So yeah. But it's interesting. I mean, the purgatory stuff that I had earlier, I mean, coming up in a Protestant tradition, I never really took purgatory all that seriously. Not that I'm like anti it, but like I didn't really see it in the Bible and it wasn't really talked about. And like purgatory was something I knew about kind of from like Dante. But, you know, I think one theory that I'm open to exploring is that like I'm already dead. And like it certainly would explain some things. And so I'm interested in probably looking deeper into what purgatory is, the plausibility of it, and purgatory itself might be a simulation. One of the people that I really resonate the most with, we see things very similarly, is my friend Nikki G on Twitter or Instagram. I forget. I think she goes on Twitter. Goes by what's the blonde character, Anna Nicole Wordsmith or something like that.
Oh yeah, I follow that one. Yeah, I follow that account.
So she's awesome, and something that we talk about a lot is this being purgatory. It certainly would explain some things. So yeah.
No, I think the idea that we're already in the afterlife is something that I consider seriously anyway.
Yeah. I think there seems to be some level of disclosure. I don't know if you've ever seen the show The Good Place. That kind of resonates with me. The Good Place, and I'm now gradually chipping away at Lost. I know I'm like 20 years too late on that.
I'm late on that too, but I've continued to have people tell me I need to watch it. They're like, you would love it the way you think. I'm like, okay.
Yeah. The idea of being, I don't know if I believe in purgatory, but these shows and these movies, which clearly have functioned as some form of disclosure, seem to be pointing us to that. And you could make that compatible with the simulation theory and all the other films, whether it be Truman Show or Donnie Darko about alternate timelines that are unstable and exist temporarily.
Have you seen the video online talking about Donnie Darko is actually Donald Trump?
Oh yeah, with Donnie Darko. Yeah. There's clearly a lot of symbolism there. Him wearing the Triumph T-shirt, and I love Donnie Darko because it took place outside Richmond.
Virginia. Yeah, no, it's actually Middlesex High School, which is the high school that I went to.
Yeah. And I maybe not so much now, but like 20 years ago, people told me I kind of look like Jake Gyllenhaal, and he's like my age. And
it's hilarious too that it's shot in California. It's like, the setting is Middlesex High School, Virginia, and there's mountains in the background. So anybody who actually like understands that that's supposed to be in Virginia is going to be like, that's not.
Was it shot in California? I felt like they shot some of it in Richmond.
No, I actually did the deep dive on that one. Yeah, it's shot in Cali, but the director or the writer, I think it's
Richard Kelly. Yeah,
he's from Richmond. Yeah, he was actually from Middlesex. Well, he had a summer home in Middlesex. He stayed in Middlesex a lot as a youngin.
He's an interesting guy. That the whole story of how that movie came together is very interesting. It seems like one of those that the universe kind of delivered up, but there's a lot going on in that film, and I think there's.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if there's like some big conspiracy. Sometimes these things just flow through people, and there seems to be some foreshadowing of Donald Trump there. Yes.
One thought that I kind of saved when you mentioned the afterlife. So just the name itself, afterlife, like once you start to seriously question the nature of time, right? If now is truly all there is, then this is like the before life, the life, and the afterlife all right now anyway, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyways, that's I guess an unorthodox way, because I said I'm strongly consider the idea that we're in the afterlife, but it's like even saying it that way, I felt like I needed to clarify that the reason that I seriously consider that is because of my doubt for what we're taught about time itself. Like even built into the word afterlife is after what?
Yeah.
After
well,
right now?
I mean, who knows how many times you and I have had this conversation. So this wouldn't be this would actually be like, it messes with that, right? Like depending on where we are on the cycle, the perspective, is this after or before? Where are we on it? So there you go. I probably should bring this to an end soon, if that's
I was literally just about to say that, but I wanted to wait to see what you had to say, and you said exactly what I was. We're on the same page there, man. So awesome. It was an awesome conversation, so thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we can totally do it again sometime. Hopefully I was able to answer some of the questions that you had about the apocryphal texts and the Apocrypha.
You answered most of my questions when you sent the notes over, to be honest with you.
Well, you told me about this maybe like a month ago, and I was like, what does he want to know? And I'm just like, I don't know. I guess I better go deep into this. So, and there's a lot of things. If anybody listens to this all the way through, there's so much I don't know. And I try to be honest.
It's clear that you were a professor in previous times.
Maybe in another life. Yeah.
Yeah, in another life. But great conversation, and shout out and thank you to the production team over on your side as well.
For sure. I hope she's still listening. But yeah, we'll bring it to a close. Thank you so much for having me here, Garnet.
Thank you, sir. Have a good night.
All right. Take care.
Do you believe in repent? What if the kingdom of heaven's within you? Do you think you would enter? What do you know? How do you know truth from the pit of your soul, or just cause somebody told you? Do you think about what you think about? Do you see yourself in the people that you hang around? Keep quiet, let me think aloud. Listen up, wanna break it down and question your perceptions. I'ma break it down and question your perceptions. Do you ever question your perceptions? Do you ever question it? Oh yeah. What if your money was worthless? Then would you know what your worth is and reconsider living with a purpose? How would you determine what work is? Are you seeking what's easy to purchase, or is it deeper than what's on the surface? Do you question your perceptions? Ever so is real, It ain't your politicians, nor your status. All of that is fiction, so it's real, It ain't your entertainment, nor the industry. I heard it's filled with fake shit. And I need truth over everything, yeah. I need truth above all else. Just I need truth over everything, yeah. Give me the truth, give me the truth, give me the truth, yeah.